Hi everyone. Welcome to our webinar today, Essential Skills Levels in Reading, Text, and Document Use, and an introduction presented by Kyle Downie from SkillPlan. My name is Allison Mullen, and I'm the Manager of Communications and Marketing here at the Ontario Literacy Coalition, so welcome everyone. Before we get started, I just want to give you a few instructions. On the right-hand side of your screen is your dashboard. There you can chat with each other in the chat pane and ask questions in the questions pane. If it's a technical question, we'll try to answer and assist you as soon as possible. If it's a question pertaining to the topic of the webinar, feel free to ask any time, and Kyle will be addressing all the questions at the end of the webinar as well. And if you'd like to participate on Twitter, we like to keep the conversation going. Just use the hashtag OLCWeb. Now to introduce our presenter. For over 10 years, Kyle Downie has worked both internationally and nationally, leading educational teams, developing and designing curriculum, instructing, mentoring, and creating educational programs in secondary and post-secondary schools, and for private and public industries. Currently, he is the Vice President of Operation with SkillPlan, where he focuses on developing strategies to improve the essential skills of people working in the construction industry in British Columbia and the Yukon Territory. So from there, I'll take it away, Kyle.
All right. Thank you so much. Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. Firstly, I'd like to welcome everybody to the webinar here, an introduction to essential skill levels in reading, text, and document use. And as Allison mentioned, my name is Kyle Downie, and I'm the CEO of SkillPlan now. And before we get started to this webinar, what I'd like to do just briefly is just kind of give you a quick background on SkillPlan, since some of you might not be aware of our organization. But we've been around for about 20 years, and our mission and mandate is to develop strategies to improve the essential skills of people working in the construction industry in BC and around Canada. Even though our focus is on construction, but because we deal with essential skills, as you know, these are transferable skills, and we work with many other industries to support ES issues. But some of our services, we do a lot of support to individual apprentices in training. We've tutored thousands of apprentices over the years, helping raise their essential skills so that they can actually attain their red seal. We do a lot of support with various training partners or technical training schools, and we really support on how to integrate ES into technical training. And so we look at curriculum development or mentoring instructors, technical instructors on the aspects of essential skills. Publications, we usually produce 1 or 2 a year, and it's really based on how we respond to some of the issues that we see or trends within the industry related to essential skills. And our latest publications on controlling complexity, which later on to this webinar I'll tell you more about. But at the end of this presentation, I will be presenting resources that will be useful for you for kind of taking a learner from point A to point B, moving them up on that cognitive ladder. And we also do research and development. We've been involved in essential skills research and development since really the beginning of this movement, and it really has helped shape everything we do regarding essential skills. And obviously the last thing is advocacy. We're big promoters of essential skills. We believe in it, and we believe that by using this model, it's a great way of really moving those learners up that ladder quickly. So just a quick overview of the webinar. What I'm going to talk about is really briefly, I just want to talk about the background of IALS. A lot of you know this, but I really want to kind of tie in how the framework of IALS influenced the framework of essential skills, because when I talk about levels today and question strategy related to moving those markers for those learners, it's really important to understand where it came from. So I'll be doing the background of IALS, understanding essential skills levels, and then strategies to help learners increase their essential skills, and then some useful resources that you can use in the classroom for those learners. So just a brief history of essential skills. As you know, there's a study that was conducted in 1994 called the International Adult Literacy Survey, or IALS. And its goal was really to find out how well adults use printed information to function in society relative to a wider economic and social outcomes. But the nice thing about this is it allowed researchers to demonstrate a strong, plausible link between literacy and a country's economic potential, which in the end ultimately influenced policy decision, and it influenced Canada relative to policy decisions. But the nice thing about IALS, it really changed the way literacy was defined. It distinguished different kinds of reading, prose and document, and it included math, numeracy, and problem solving. And it really extended the boundaries of what was traditionally considered as literacy. It applied a new statistical methodology that allowed a direct measure of performance to assess skill and ability instead of kind of proxy measures such as years of schooling or self-report, which was kind of used in the past to identify your literacy levels. But this specific literacy task model was designed for IALS, and it used a scale of 500. And then that scale that was used in IALS was used in the framework for essential skills, especially in reading, text, document use, and numeracy. So as you can see here on the left, this is really the framework that I'm talking about, the 0 to 500 scale. And you can see where the essential skills levels 1 through 5 kind of fit on that scale, with the level 1 being 0 to 225 and level 2, 225 to 275 and so forth. But just some interesting trivia related to the study. Based on this IELTS study, about 42% of Canadians were functioning between 0 and 200 and roughly 275. And what Canada thought at that time was that there must be a bit of an issue, because they knew that this was the lower end of the spectrum related to literacy. And Canada spent about the same amount of money as Sweden on education, but Sweden only had about 30% of their population at that level, levels 1 and 2, or between 0 and 275. So because of that, because of the results of the IELTS survey, Canada realized that they had to look into this problem much further. And from this issue, they spent quite a bit of money on research, which ultimately defined what essential skills are today, and it really helped profile the jobs from an essential skills perspective. But it was because of the IELTS study and the results that Canada decided to spend money on defining really what the issues are and then putting together a matrix, essential skills, from that. But that matrix is heavily influenced from IELTS. And so today we're kind of talking about complexity and strategies for kind of how to move a learner from point A to point B. And the model that was used in IELTS and that is now used in essential skills for understanding complexity can really be broken down into 4 general areas. So for complexity, the first way you'll look at it is there's complexity in the type of requested information. And this is really complexity in a question. So you can be requesting for something that's very concrete to something that's very abstract. And then there's complexity in the type of match. And this is how you find information in the document. And then once you find that information, you need to process it. So that's type of processing, and there's complexity in that as well. And then overarching all of this, there's this thing called competing information. And this is where a learner can get distracted from understanding the question, from finding the information, or processing that information to come up with a solution. And so really these 4 factors influence what a complex task is related to essential skills. And so what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to try to demonstrate essential skills levels 1 through 5 using type of match. So just a quick note, I'm only talking about one dimension of complexity, but type of match, there's a strong correlation between type of match and how successful a person's going to be with finding information in a document. So that's why I wanted to use this as an example. And I thought the way I'm going to use it, and I've done this before, but it was all in person, so this is my first time I've done it on a webinar, but I'm going to teach type of match through playing cards. I'm hoping everyone could hear me, because I just got a note that we're experiencing difficulties with the audio conference. So hopefully everything's okay. So I'm just going to continue on. Allison or Amber, let me know if there are any difficulties related to it. Thank you. Okay. So what I want you to do right now, those of you who actually brought a deck of cards with you to this webinar, and those of you who don't, that's fine. You can use your imagination here. But what I want you to do is I want you to imagine that that deck of cards that you have in your hand represents 52 pieces of information, or a textbook, or a policy manual at work, etc. But it's really 52 pieces of information. And what I want you to do right now is I want you to locate the ace of hearts in the deck. So I want you to shuffle through that deck and pull out that ace of hearts. So I'm going to give you 30 seconds to do that. Okay, for those of you who are not card players and you're still shuffling through the deck, that's all right. But you know what you did here is you looked at the ace of hearts on this PowerPoint and you cycled through the deck to locate one piece of information. This really represents a level 1 task. A learner is good at making a direct match to locate one single piece of information. That's really a level 1 task. And how this kind of works in a document, if I asked you the question, circle the hand signal for stop, what a learner would have to do is they would use the keyword stop in this task and locate this in the document and then circle it. So as you can see here, it's a direct match, just like finding that ace of hearts. Stop, see that stop there in the document, circle it, direct match. About 20% of Canadians would possibly struggle at this task. But this really represents a level 1 task. Let's try a level 2. So again, put all your cards together. And what I want you to do right now is find all the aces in the deck. So I want you to shuffle through the deck and pull out all the aces, please. I'll give you 20 to 30 seconds for that. Okay, so now the big difference between a level 1 and here what you're doing for a level 2 is you had to still cycle through the deck, but you located multiple pieces of information, and it happened to be 4 pieces of information, the 4 aces. So a level 2 task compared to a level 1 task, the big difference is you're locating multiple pieces of information. So let's take a look at a document and see how it plays out. So in this document here, if I asked a question, which levels of apprenticeship are considered probationary, what you're doing here is you're taking the keywords from this task, levels and probationary, and you're scanning the document to locate those keywords, probationary, like you were locating the ace of hearts. So you locate it here, then you keep on scanning, work your way down here, and now you see probationary and level. And then you realize the answer to the questions is levels 1 and 2. So what you did here is, again, you've cycled through this document. You located multiple pieces of information to come up with a response. That's a level 2 task. So you're locating, you're cycling to locate at least 2 pieces of information. Let's try a level 3. Okay, so again, put all those cards together. What I want you to do now is find all of the hearts and place them in order from lowest to highest, with the ace being the lowest and the king being the highest. So I'll give you 45 seconds for this one. Okay, I'll give you 10 more seconds. Okay, so the big difference here between a level 1, a level 2, and now a level 3 for type of match, what you really have to do, you're still cycling through that deck. You're still locating multiple pieces of information. But now, to kind of crank up that complexity a bit, what you're doing is you're integrating that information. You're piecing it together. You're putting it together. And that's from the ace to the king. That's a level 3 task. That's a big difference. To be able to integrate information or pull multiple pieces of information out from some type of source and then integrate it together is a complex level 3 task. And about 42% of Canadians would probably struggle at this, to be able to do this consistently. And to really succeed in technical training, I believe that you need to be able to integrate. Let's see how it plays out in an actual document. Okay, let's try that again. There we go. Okay, so taking a look at this document here on the right, the question is, what is the similarity between the tail length of a standard 6 to 8 strand wire rope and a rotational resistant wire rope? So again, using the keywords in the question, standard 6 to 8 strand wire rope, rotational resistant rope, and tail length, I'm going to try to find out the similarities. So I'm going to scan the document using the keywords. I locate the areas within the document. And then I see the 6 to 8 strand wire rope. I see the tail length. And then I read that information there. And then I go down to the rotational resistant wire rope. Again, I find that tail length. I read that there. But then what I'm doing is now I'm doing the comparison or the integrating. And I find out that the answer is not less than 6 inches. So the big difference here is I'm locating multiple pieces of information, but I'm doing that comparison for similarity. I'm integrating that information to come up with one response. And that's a level 3 task. So let's try level 4. Let's see what this looks like. So a level 4 task, I'm not going to get you to do this. I'm going to talk to it because unfortunately you don't have enough time. Determine the 3 most popular card games and find the best hand for each game. So what you're doing here for a level 4 task, you're still locating multiple cards or pieces of information. You're cycling through the deck. You're also integrating that to come up with the best hand. But related to coming up with the best hand, there's something that you need in order to figure out what the best hand is for, say, blackjack. You need background knowledge. That's the big difference between a level 3 and a level 4. Background knowledge comes into play. So a level 5, which is the highest, can anyone guess what it would be? Well, what it is design a card game. It's generating something new. So you're still locating, you're cycling, you're locating, you're integrating. It probably requires background knowledge, but you're generating something new from all of that. And that is a level 5 task. So in summary, level 1 is really to locate one piece of information. A level 2 is locate and cycling multiple pieces of information. A level 3 is where you're locating, cycling, and integrating that information. A level 4, you require background or prior knowledge to solve that. And then a level 5 is you're generating something new. So going back to the IALS scale, or the essential skills levels here for reading, text, and document use, we know that really level 1, you're dealing with learners that have literacy challenges. And if we go right down to the 0 area down there, I mean, these are people who are struggling with mechanics of reading. They're sounding out words, they're sounding out letters. They're connecting letters to letters and then words to form sentences. They're really struggling with literacy. They require a lot of support, and we know that. But as you progress up that level, you know, they're able to make that one direct match. That's really what an essential skills level 1 would be. And if you look at levels 1 to 2, really, to me, because these learners can't integrate well, they're really learning how to learn still. You know, they're able to locate information. Their sentence structure, you know, when you're in the level 2, it's not too bad. You know, their vocabulary is still limited, but they can't integrate. Integrate's the key. And that's where level 3 happens for integration. That's where transferability happens. And that's where the learners are going to be able to learn well on their own. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to present a useful strategy for helping move a learner up this ladder from a level 1 to a level 2 to a level 3. So I'm going to show you a strategy that works quite well. So going back to this document here, which levels of apprenticeship are considered probationary, there's really some cognitive steps that are required, as we know, to solve this problem. And so the big question is, if we broke down some of these cognitive steps, would we be able to identify where the learner struggles? So going into this question, what a typical learner would have to do to solve this problem, they're going to identify what is required in this task, to complete this task. So they're reading the question, which levels of apprenticeship are considered probationary? And then what they're doing is they're identifying the key words within the questions related to this task, which levels, and probationary for the apprenticeship. And then from there, they're using these key words within the question to scan the document, levels and probationary, to locate the specific information. Once they locate that information, then they got to figure out whether or not they have everything there to answer the question. So sometimes when you locate the information, you're going to realize that you actually require background knowledge to understand it. In this example, you don't. So you don't need that. So once you find that information, you have to decide that this is the information you need in the document. And then based on that task question, you say that this is the answer, levels 1 and 2. But each one of those cognitive steps are really cognitive hurdles that a learner can struggle with. So maybe they struggle with breaking down the question properly, or maybe they struggle with finding that information within the document, scanning, using the keywords, or maybe once they have the keywords, they have trouble piecing it together, processing that information. So each one of those are cognitive steps, and these are strategies that you can use to figure out exactly where the learner is struggling. And the nice thing is if you teach these learners these steps, then they're going to start thinking about their thinking. Metacognition really happens. But these are the steps: identify, scan, locate, recognize, and decide. So what I recommend is always using these steps in your classroom when you're working with your learners when they're trying to find information in a document. So identify what is required. Break down the question to find out the given and requested information. And then using the keywords from the question, you scan the document to find the information. You then are able to locate the information. And at times when you locate some of the information, you may need background knowledge. But once you find all that information, then you got to piece it together and process it, and you decide that that's the answer. So all of those are cognitive steps or cognitive hurdles that a learner has to go through to solve problems. So related to that, this is our newest resource, Controlling Complexity. And so what we did is we worked with Michael Hart, who's done a lot of work with Pete Mosenthal, who's one of the thinkers behind IALS. And we looked at the theory behind complexity. So as I mentioned earlier, type of requested information, type of match, type of processing, and competing information. So we talk about all that in this publication, and then we talk about here are some strategies for people to be better at snapping the question, breaking down the question, finding that information, and processing that information. So I definitely recommend you taking a look at this publication. I think it's quite useful to really help you with being a stronger teacher. The more you can understand the theory behind complexity, I think the better you'll be at with delivery for your students. Now, how I look at this Mosenthal's taxonomy for controlling complexity, it's really like Bloom's taxonomy, but it's expanded. It's more detailed. I joke around with Mike Hart, and I say this is Bloom's taxonomy on steroids. But really, that's what this is. It's looking at the theory of complexity and then strategies for moving those markers. So take a look at this publication. We also have an online workshop that helps you go through this publication to really understand complexity and apply the strategies. On our website, there's an area in our website called How Do Your Skills Measure Up? And we get about 500,000 hits a month. And mainly, I would say it's related to this part of our website. And it's basically free resources that you can use in your classroom. I've used this a lot when I was at a college for helping teach students be able to integrate information well so that they can succeed in college. But what this is we went to the workplace and pulled out a lot of example documents, and then we created reading document use and numeracy or mathematic exercises from levels 1 through 5. And each one of these exercises, there's answers to it as well as the cognitive steps. So what I used to do is when I was just learning this theory, the cognitive theory, and the steps behind it, I would look at the steps to finding the answer, and then I would have the students go through the steps there, and then that would tell me where exactly they're having problems, and then I would basically adjust my teaching relative to that. But you got free tests on here, free practice activity sets, and then you have activity booklets related to specific careers. So I definitely recommend you exploring this. And this is an example of what it actually looks like. So here's a bunch of task questions. Here's a document which you've seen. And then over here is the answer key with the cognitive steps. And as you can see here on the bottom, we even rate it. So reading text level 2 for task number 1. And this relates to CLB 5, 6, and 7. So it's a great resource, definitely recommend it, especially looking at those cognitive steps. Scan, locate, decide. You'll know where the learner's having problems. Just some of our other resources here. Again, all about essential skills. We really try to apply this with an application base related to the workplace. Thinking strategies for numeracy is, again, looking at the cognitive steps, but now we're looking at using that to solve mathematical problems. Reading at work, this is heavily influenced by Michael Hart and Pete Mosenthal, teaching people about how to be good readers. There's great activity suggestions and self-directed activities for the learner to go through. I mentioned about controlling complexity. The oral communication at work, I think, is a great little publication that you would like. We actually went into the workplace, captured audio components of people talking in work in various scenarios. And then from there we had activities around those audio components. It's good for the ESL learner. Document use at work is really a heavy theory publication. It looks at the structure of documents. But we have quite a bit more publications. I definitely recommend you taking a look at them. They're great resources with helping move that learner from point A to point B. And just a couple other things. There's some workshops that relate to building, for example, workplace material developer in the left column here. This is really about teaching you how to develop activity sets with the cognitive steps in there. I definitely recommend taking a look at that. We have a publication on that in case you didn't want to do the workshop. And then the other aspect is the other workshop, Connecting Workplace Needs and Essential Skills. I know a lot of you are doing more and more work in the workplace. This is a model about how to really integrate essential skills into the workplace. I'm going to open this up to Q&A. Amber wanted me to leave about 20 minutes for questions. Again, what I showed you was kind of a brief high level, 30,000 feet, what's the difference between the level 1 through a level 5, and then the cognitive steps behind solving a problem. And the more you understand those cognitive steps, the better off you are at solving problems and understanding where your learners are struggling. So I'm going to open it up now if anyone has any questions.
Hi, everyone. If you have a question for Kyle, you can ask it in the question pane, and we'll make sure to make sure it gets asked. So I'll just give everyone a minute to do that. Any questions pertaining to the topic or more information.
Okay, I'll wait. I got the sniffles today, so that'll give me an opportunity to just blow my nose. Sorry about that.
Okay, Kyle, we do have a question here. Do you have to pay for these resources?
The resources on the website is free. So I'm going to go back here and show you it. I think I can go back, yep. So this resource here, come on, this one here, how do your skills measure up? It's free. That's why we get 500,000 hits a month. So you can go in here, you can pull out actual tests that test a level 1, a level 2, level 3, all the way to level 5 using authentic workplace documents. And then there's a lot of practice activities. There's thousands of questions here. And then there's actual activity booklets related to a career. So like if someone wanted to go in to be a chef, we have actual booklets with activity sets levels 1 through roughly 1 through 4 related to cooking. But this is all free. So I definitely recommend you using it. It's a great free resource. You'll really like it. All the other ones, the publications, are for sale. We are a not-for-profit, so we're just concerned about cost recovery. Our goal is not to profit off everyone.
Okay. Another question, I don't know if you'll be able to answer this, probably not seeing as you're from BC, but I'll ask it and then maybe OLC can try to follow up with you, Deborah. But how do these 5 levels correlate to the new Ontario Adult Literacy Curriculum Framework? I don't know if you're familiar with it at all, Kyle.
You know what? I would have to look at it in detail. So if someone could send me that, I can probably I can kind of review it and do my interpretation of it. My guess is if that curriculum framework followed the essential skills framework, then there's going to be a correlation to it. So that's my short response to it. But I'd be happy to look at it in detail to let you know.
Okay, great. Yeah, we at the OLC can send you that. We have one here. I just finished training using the Controlling Complexities with Mike Hart last week, and it was great, well-recommended training. That's a comment, and resource too. They are supposed to be the same as ES. For choose complaints here. I'm having a lot of questions around the PowerPoint presentation. This webinar will be recorded and put up on the Spotlight on Learning website, so you'll be able to watch it again as well.
Hello?
Any other questions? We have another one. Can you provide any further understanding into the difference in percentages of individuals at level 1 for Canada and Sweden, 12%?
As far as percent goes?
Yeah.
For level 1, yeah, we can go back. Now, this is 1994, so where I pulled some of these stats, there's some new stats. But, I mean, to me, the big thing is for Canada is Canada spent, they were at that time period spending the same amount of money as Sweden for education, as I mentioned. And, you know, for Canada, about 16%, as you can see here, we're functioning at a level 1. Now, for Sweden, For a level 1 or level 2, I don't know offhand. I can check and respond to you. I know the total was 30%. I don't want to give an inaccurate percentage for level 1, but my guess is that there was probably a higher chunk in level 2. During that time period, I was told that in Sweden, in order to get married, you had to, for a long time, you actually had to pass the literacy test. So I think that really heavily influenced people wanting to be literate so that they can get married. That's what I heard. I haven't checked in on whether or not that actually happened, but I found that kind of interesting. Basically, the big difference is 30% for Sweden, levels 1 and 2, and 42 for Canada. But unfortunately, I don't have the level 1 for Sweden.
Okay. Another question here: are the SkillPlan resources available in French?
We do have, yes. Some of the resources are in French. So if you go to our website, you'll be able to see which resources are in French. Yes.
Okay, great.
Like, for example, the Reading at Work, which is a great resource, that's in French.
Okay, great. Do all provinces have the same regulations or practices on workplace? So what is true to Ontario is the same in any province?
Sorry, can you repeat that question, please?
Basically, do all provinces have the same regulations or practices on workplace, essential skills?
Regulations for, like, integrating essential skills? What do you mean by regulations?
This is all they said. I'm going to ask the person to maybe follow up that question with a little bit, something a little more explanatory.
Yeah, to me, just related to essential skills in the workplace, it's really about aligning relative to the job tasks, the technical training that the employee has to go through, and benchmarking that learner relative to that. And that's going to give you your skill gap. And whether it's in BC or you're doing work in Quebec, you really need to follow that model. So, you know, what makes up a good worker? What are the skills behind that? That's really your learning outcomes. What are the skills required in technical training? That's also your learning outcomes. And what's the typical benchmark of the learners or the actual workers? And then based on that, that's going to give you your skill gap and help define your training program.
Okay. Another question. I've heard it said that the literacy level 1 starts at IALS 0, decoding, phonics, etc., but that essential skills level 1 generally doesn't begin until a little higher on the IALS scale, past literacy decoding. Can you comment or explain this? And she said one of your slides seems to address this a bit.
Yeah, basically, from what I know, it actually, for IALS, for the 0 to 500 scale, technically it starts right at the basic decoding. So as far as essential skills go, I didn't actually create the model for it. I don't know for sure if it actually goes right from the 0 point, but to me, if they use the actual IALS framework, then the assumption would be yes. But I don't know for sure. I can't respond to that. Sorry.
Okay. Can you give us details for the levels of complexity for type of requested info, type of processing, and competing information?
The levels of complexity?
Yeah. For type of requested info, type of processing, and competing information.
Yep. So I guess the big thing for this is the type of requested information. It's going from something concrete to something abstract. So if I'm requesting something in a document that's asking what is the name of the person that wrote that test, that's very concrete, to requesting something that's quite abstract. For type of match, I kind of went through that with you. And with type of match, as I said, the big things about how you're finding that information. So with type of match, it's really, first thing is you're locating a single piece of information, then you're locating multiple pieces of information, and then from there you're integrating it, piecing it together, and then from there you require background knowledge, and then it's generating something new. Now with type of processing, Type of processing is really about, once you have that information, how are you processing it? So the simplest type of processing is identifying something. And then it kind of works up the ladder from sorting to defining to describing to narrating to summarizing, explaining, justifying, and persuading. So that's how the progression works for type of processing. For complexity. And then competing information is really about what kind of information is distracting you from the type of requested information, the type of match, and the type of processing. So that's a quick summary of the complexities for this. I recommend you taking a look at the Controlling Complexity publication. This will give you a lot of information on that.
Okay, great. Do you have a sense of how many employers have hired youth who have low essential skills in the construction field? If so, what support has the employer provided to their employees?
So just repeat that question, please.
Okay. Do you have a sense of how many employers have hired youth who have low essential skills in the construction field? If so, what support has the employer provided to their employees?
So how many employers have hired people with low essential skills?
Yeah.
And then what kind of support was put in place?
Yeah, it said here specifically youth.
Okay. To me? Okay, well, basically it depends on the trade. So for example, laborers and specialized workers, you see a lot more people in there with lower essential skills. Part of it because across Canada, they do have a Red Seal program, but not all the provinces have that. So you'll see a lot more people with essential skills gaps. But every one of the trades, there will be certain gaps. And how much the employer actually supports that, from our perspective, where you see a lot of the support is actually more in the actual training schools. So when they go into an apprenticeship program and they're in the training school, we see a lot of the instructors trying to work with these typical learners that have skill gaps related to getting through apprenticeship program. Unless the gap is really huge and they don't have the actual requirements in high school math, science, and English to actually apply, that's a bigger gap, and then the employers might recommend them to actually go and get the required courses. But typically where I see a lot of support is actually when they're in technical training. And then with us, that's when we're dealing a lot with these apprentices. So when we find out a lot about them when they're struggling is in technical training, and then we put together an intervention program to support that, and that typically happens in their 8 weeks of training every year. But as well as when they're back on the job, they might come see us in the evenings and the weekends, or sometimes even during the day. If it's during the day, then certain employers will actually give release time for these apprentices who have these essential skill gaps to be able to get the help that they need.
Okay, great. Going back to the question, the Canada versus Sweden stats there.
Yeah.
The person who asked that had a second point of clarity. You mentioned that Canada and Sweden spent the same amount of money on education prior to 1994. Is that the same amount of money when looked at by population base? Sweden's population is just over 9 million.
That I could not answer. I'm sorry. I can look into it and get back to you.
Okay. And here is maybe a little more simpler question, but what is the cost for the Controlling Complexities document?
The Controlling Complexity publication cost is, I'm just going to look at it right now because the price just got changed. Controlling Complexity cost is $89. Okay.
What is the percentage of immigrants who go through apprenticeship programs? Is this true for both Canadians and new immigrants?
The percentage of immigrants in apprenticeship programs, I could not give you an accurate number on that. But what I would say is, depending on the trade, you will see more immigrants in a particular apprenticeship program. So, for example, it just depends on the requirements to actually get into that trade. And so, for example, in the electrical field, you might see less immigrants in it because of the higher requirements in that trade to actually get into it. Whereas laborers and specialized workers, you'll see more. Same with the finishing trades.
Okay. Is there any plan to translate controlling complexity?
Is there, sorry?
Is there a plan to translate it?
To translate it to French?
I'm assuming.
Yeah, that would be one of our hopes.
Okay. Next question. The top is easy. TOP is easy. Identify, sort, define, and describe, moderate, narrate, summarize, compare, contrast. Difficult, explain, justify, persuade. Where does level 1 begin, level 2, level 3, level 4?
That's a very good question. Well, all of those relate to zones. So for example, in type of processing, identify would be kind of classified in a zone 1, as well as in type of requested information, a personal, animal, thing, or place would be a zone 1. And that would be kind of classified as a level 1. It's a three-dimensional model. And so what you got to really look at is based on that cube, or that three-dimensional model, that determines, because what you can have is you can have a higher type of requested information with a simpler processing and a simpler type of match, and that's going to influence what the levels would be. So it's really relative to the 3 factors as well as competing information.
Okay, I'm just going to ask if there's any more questions. I think we've gone through all of them asked already. And just to let everyone know, we will be following up and sending a link to the webinar in the follow-up email.
Okay, I'd just like to thank everyone for being here for the webinar. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. And what I'd recommend the most, just related to this webinar, is to take a look at the Controlling Complexity publication. It's really well done. It's simple to read in the sense that we went heavy in the theory, but we tried to explain it in a way that someone can really read it at a nice pace. And as well as the activities for the strategies for figuring out where the learner struggles in those cognitive steps are really well illustrated in there. I definitely recommend you looking at that. And then the other aspect is go to our website for those free resources. They're really good. And
how can they find information to contact you, Kyle?
On the last slide is my email address. So it's K and then DOWNIE at skillplan.ca. I'm just working my way there.
And actually, I have one last question before you do go.
Yep.
Follow up. Is Zone 1 Level 1, Zone 2 Level 2, et cetera, et cetera?
No, it's not. Basically, for type of requested information, Zone 1 to 3 would roughly be up to a high Level 2. So it's really influenced by type of requested information, type of processing, type of match, and competing information. But you can, in general, you can say Zone 1 to 3 is roughly levels 1, 2, and just touching into 3.
Okay, great. I think that is it. Thank you so much, Kyle, for presenting today. Really interesting. And thank you, everyone, for attending. And we'll be in touch soon, and please keep tuned for further webinars. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a good day, everyone.